Welcome to Z Time. We know you're a survivor, and thanks for listening. We love you. On with the story. Friday mornings were usually the easiest part of the week. I just finished my last call. An aggressive raccoon holed up under a duplex porch off Franklin, and the adrenaline had finally drained out of me. Paperwork done. Truck cleaned. Radio quiet. The kind of end-of-week calm that lets you mentally check out before you actually clock off. Leo Carrillo State Park was already playing in my head. Salt air, firewood popping, Ron's terrible instant coffee. Ron was up near Oxnard and heading to the spot in the afternoon. 2 days up the coast, phones off, pretending the world didn't exist beyond tide tables and wind direction. I turned onto Hollywood Boulevard with the windows down. Sun still low enough to throw long shadows across the Walk of Fame. Tourists clustered around handprints. Street performers were already out. Elvis, Batman, 2 different jokers arguing over territory. Traffic crawled as usual. The radio murmured in the background, one of those morning shows that tries to sound casual while sneaking in bad news. Local hospitals issuing advisories this morning. The host said, tone force light. Doctors are reporting an increase in patients presenting with severe flu-like symptoms, high fever, confusion, respiratory distress. I barely reacted. Hospitals always issued advisories. But then I started noticing the people. A woman leaning against a storefront window, pale and sweating despite the cool morning. A man sitting on the curb, staring straight ahead, hands trembling in his lap. A tour guide snapping at his group, eyes glassy, words slurring just enough to be unsettling. I'd spent years watching animals right before something went wrong. The stiffness, the delay between stimulus and reaction, that off-kilter body language that says this creature is not okay. Hollywood Boulevard felt like that. At a red light near Highland, a guy in a business suit staggered sideways into traffic, coughing so hard he dropped his phone. A driver leaned on the horn, yelling, then went silent when a man turned around. His lips were bluish, his eyes unfocused. The radio crackled again. Health officials stressed that this does not appear to be seasonal influenza. A scream cut through the street. It came from up ahead, near one of the sightseeing buses. I saw a small crowd form, then scatter. Someone fell. Someone else didn't move. Then the crowd ran. Not drifted, not panic-jogged. Ran. The light turned green. No one moved. I watched a man lunge at a woman near the bus, grab her arm, and bite down hard. No shouting, no hesitation. Just a sudden, animal action that didn't belong in daylight. Hollywood exploded. Cars slammed into each other, trying to turn around. Tourists screamed. A costume performer bolted past my truck, mask half off, sobbing. Someone fired a gun, 1 shot, then 3 more. Then chaos swallowed the sound. Sirens wailed from every direction. Then, one by one, they stopped. My phone buzzed uselessly. No internet. No messages going through. I tried calling Ron. It rang twice before he answered, voice tight and breathless. "You seeing this?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Where are you?" "Oxnard." "It's not good. People acting violent. Yards overwhelmed." "I'm not driving through L.A. traffic like this." I said, "I might hole up somewhere." "Seclusion might matter," Ron said after a beat. "I'm still heading to the campsite. If this gets worse." "If it gets worse," I repeated. The line went dead. I sat there for half a second, watching smoke begin to curl upward from somewhere near sunset. Then I looked north. The Hollywood sign stood white and distant against the hills, untouched, silent. I remember tracking a mountain lion up there 2 years ago, how the terrain folded in on itself, how easy it was to disappear if you knew the trails. I made my decision. I ditched the truck near a maintenance road, grabbed my pack, rifle, handgun, tent, sleeping bag. Gear I always carry for camping, always legally, always just in case. Slung it on and started uphill. The trail was familiar. Dusty switchbacks, scrub oak and chaparral, loose gravel underfoot. The city noise faded with every step, replaced by wind and the dry rasp of cicadas. Halfway up, something moved on the trail ahead. A man stumbled into view, shirt torn, Blood dried dark around his mouth. His movements were wrong, jerky, unbalanced, like his body was running on delayed instructions. I raised the rifle, called out. He didn't respond. He came forward, moaning softly. I fired once. The round hit center mass. He barely flinched. The second shot, head level, dropped him. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, then kept climbing. By the time I reached the sign, the sun was bleeding out behind the city. I chose one of the L letters, its base wide and shadowed, providing cover from multiple angles. I pitched the tent low, staked it tight, rolled out the sleeping bag. From up there, Los Angeles was on fire. Fires dotted the basin. Sirens rose and died. Distant explosions thumped through the air. Helicopters swept searchlights across neighborhoods, then vanished. I tuned my Balfoam radio to police frequencies. Units overwhelmed. Downtown compromised. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. It felt like listening to civilization unravel in real time. The wind picked up overnight, rattling the tent. I barely slept. The next morning dawned gray and cool. Marine layer hanging low over the valley. I set snares for rabbits, checked for tracks, snake trails, deer prints, signs of predators. Hauled water from a trickling stream in storage bottles, boiled it on my jet boil. No signal, no internet, no Ron. A mountain lion watched me from a ridge that afternoon, calm and alert. We regarded each other for a long moment before it melted back into brush. Zombies wandered the lower trails occasionally, lost, slow, drawn upward by noise, but the terrain thinned them out. Sound died fast up there. I saw survivors, too. A small group moving cautiously near a fire road, arguing quietly. I stayed hidden. That night, the city glowed red again. I lay in my sleeping bag behind the L, rifle beside me, listening to wind and distant gunfire. I don't have a long-term plan. No one does. For now, I'll stay above the city, out of reach, watching, waiting. The hills have always been good at hiding things, and I intend to stay hidden. I knew the military had arrived when the helicopters stopped circling. Up until then, the air over Los Angeles had been chaos. News choppers, police birds, private helicopters trying to flee the basin. They darted everywhere. Overlapping flight paths, spotlights jittering across neighborhoods like nervous fingers. Then, sometime before dawn on the third day, they vanished. The silence woke me. No rotor wash. No distant thump. Just wind sliding through chaparral and the low crackle of fires miles away. It felt unnatural, like the city was holding its breath. I crawled out from behind the L and scanned the sky. High-altitude contrails cut clean white scars across the morning blue. Jets, fast movers. Too high to hear clearly, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. By mid-morning, the sound arrived. A deep, steady thrum rolled across the valley, not frantic, not searching. Purposeful, heavy-lift helicopters, moving in formation. Chinooks, Blackhawks. They flew low and straight, hugging corridors that avoided the densest smoke plumes. Military. I ducked back behind the sign and brought up the Balfoam, scrolling frequencies. Police channels were mostly dead now. Occasional bursts of static, a frantic voice cut off mid-sentence. But higher bands crackled with clipped, disciplined traffic. LZ compromised. Civilians intermingled. Rules of engagement updated. That last one stuck with me. Through binoculars, I watched armored vehicles roll down Hollywood Boulevard like toys from a child's playset. Maps, Humvees, troops in full kit moving methodically, rifles up, spacing perfect. For a few minutes, just a few, I felt hope. Then the shooting started. It wasn't wild like before. It was controlled, surgical, short bursts aimed high. I saw bodies drop. Some stayed down, others didn't. Zombies, infected, whatever they were, kept moving through fire that should have stopped them. Soldiers adjusted. Headshots became standard. Efficiency replaced panic. But there were too many. A line of troops fell back toward a barricade near Vine Street. A soldier tripped. Another went down trying to pull him up. The formation broke, just long enough for the infected to reach them. The radio erupted. Fall back, fall back. The transmission dissolved into screaming and gunfire. By afternoon, the military shifted tactics. They stopped trying to hold streets. They started denying zones. Explosions rolled through downtown. Controlled demolitions, fuel air blasts. Fire spread faster. Smoke turned the sky the color of rust. Helicopters dropped flares and incendiaries into areas already lost. Containment, not rescue. That night, the curfew message went out on every surviving frequency. All remaining civilians are advised. Evacuation is no longer possible. Shelter in place. Avoid all contact. I laughed then. Quietly, bitterly. Shelter in place where? The hills shook near midnight. A concussion thumped through the ground, rattling the metal of the sign. A fireball bloomed near Griffith Observatory, briefly illuminating the valley like daylight. I listened to the radio until the batteries ran low, command authorizing escalation. Unable to distinguish infected from non-infected at range. God help us. The military drew a line by day 4. I watched them build it. Roadblocks along major arteries. Jersey barriers and razor wire. Sniper teams on rooftops. Drones buzzing overhead like mechanical insects. They weren't trying to reclaim Hollywood anymore. They were trying to keep it from spreading north. I saw civilians approach checkpoints, waving shirts, carrying children. Sometimes they were let through. Sometimes they weren't. Sometimes someone in the group stumbled, and then no one crossed. Gunfire echoed, sharp and final. A group of survivors passed near my trail that afternoon. 6 people, exhausted, sunburned, carrying whatever they could. They froze when they saw me. I raised my hand slowly, rifle slung. "Don't come up here," I said quietly. "It's safer below." They looked at the city behind them, then at the sky. One of them laughed hysterically. They moved on. That evening, jets screamed overhead, lower this time. The ground shook as something big detonated near the basin's edge. The firestorm grew. I realized then what the military was really doing. They weren't saving Los Angeles. They were sacrificing it. The helicopters stopped again. This time, they didn't come back. Radio traffic thinned to nothing but automated broadcasts and occasional encrypted burst I couldn't decipher. The military line below still existed, but it was rigid now, impersonal, distant. Anyone on the wrong side was already written off. I sat behind the L, cleaning my rifle, rationing water, watching smoke roll like weather. The city no longer looked like a city. It looked like a wound. I don't know how long I can stay here, but I know one thing now. When the military arrives, it doesn't mean safety. It means the clock has started. And somewhere beyond the smoke, beyond the fires, the world is deciding how much itself it's willing to burn survive. I didn't plan to go down there. That's the truth I keep coming back to, over and over, like it might absolve me of what I saw. The message came through the bow phone just after dawn, cutting through the static like a knife. All remaining civilians within Sector Echo advised proceed immediately to Evacuation Point Bravo. Repeat, Evac Point Bravo is active until 1800 hours. Active. That word did more damage than any gunshot. It implied order, control, a plan. I killed the radio and sat still for a long time behind the L, watching the city breathe smoke. The evacuation point was south of me, near a cluster of wide streets and old sound stages. Big open areas the military loved. Flat ground, easy access, easy control. I told myself I was just going to observe, gather intel, see if it was real. But the truth was simpler and worse. After days alone, part of me needed to see another human face that wasn't feral or burning. I packed light, rifle, sidearm, water, binoculars. I took a narrow service trail down the north face, careful to avoid skylining myself. The hills were quieter now, too quiet. Even the birds had thinned out. By mid-morning, I could hear it. Noise, not screaming, not gunfire. Voices, hundreds of them. The evacuation zone sat in a wide concrete basin between abandoned studio lots and a half-finished parking structure. Razor wire cordon off lanes like cattle chutes. Military trucks idled near the perimeter. A banner hung crookedly between 2 light poles. Evacuation processing. Wait for instructions. People filled the space beneath it. Families, singles, elderly, kids clutching stuffed animals. They were sunburned, dehydrated, desperate, but alive. Hope is loud when it hasn't learned better yet. I found a vantage point on a low hill overlooking the zone and brought up my binoculars. At first glance, it looked functional. Soldiers directed foot traffic. Medics checked people at the front of the line. Armored vehicles formed a loose perimeter. A helicopter hovered overhead. Rotor washed flattening trash and loose paper into frantic spirals. Then I noticed the cages. Chain link pens off to one side. Dozens of people inside. Some sitting, some pacing, some held down by zip ties. Screening. I listened to the radio again. Any signs of confusion, aggression, respiratory distress. The line lurched suddenly. Someone near the front collapsed. Medics rushed in. Soldiers raised rifles, not pointing yet, but ready. The collapsed man convulsed. His limbs jerked violently. A woman screamed his name and tried to reach him. She was shoved back. Then he got up. Too fast. Too wrong. He lunged. The first shot cracked the air. Clean. Precise. The crowd froze. Then panic detonated. People surged backward, pressing against wire and barriers. Children were lifted overhead. Someone tripped and vanished under crowd. More infected revealed themselves, not suddenly, but gradually, like rot surfacing in fruit. A woman screaming too loud. A man biting down on a soldier's forearm. A teenager slamming his head against the concrete until blood slicked the ground. Gunfire erupted, controlled at first, then not. The perimeter collapsed inward as soldiers tried to contain the breach. The helicopter pulled up sharply, drifting away as figures below swarmed. Someone triggered a siren, loud, pulsing, catastrophic. It drew everything. Zombies poured in from side streets, alleys, parking garages, drawn by sound and motion, slow but relentless. The crowd broke in every direction. The evacuation zone became a feeding ground. I watched soldiers retreat to vehicles, dragging wounded, leaving civilians behind. A gate slammed shut. Razor wire dropped into place. Inside the wire, people screamed and pounded and begged. No one opened it. The radio crackled. Evac Point Bravo is no longer viable. I lowered the binoculars, stomach hollow. This was the truth of it. Evacuation zones weren't rescues. They were filters. And when the filter failed, it was sealed and forgotten. I backed away from the ridge, careful not to make a sound, the screams carrying far behind me. By the time I reached the hills again, the sun was sinking and the city was burning in new places. I didn't turn the radio back on. Some things don't need confirmation. That night, behind the L, the wind carried the echo of that siren long after it stopped sounding. And I understood something then with a clarity that hurt. If you wait for permission to survive, you won't. And Los Angeles was done asking. The hills had always felt permanent to me, older than the city, patient, indifferent. That illusion died on the seventh day. I woke to a low, distant roar that didn't belong to wind or fire. It vibrated through the ground first, then through my chest. I rolled out from the tent, heart already racing, and climbed just enough to peer over the edge of the L. Convoys. Military convoys grinding up the access roads below Griffith Park. Maps, fuel trucks, armored personnel carriers. Engineers riding on the backs, shovels and coils of wire strapped beside rifles. They weren't scouting. They were building. I brought the binoculars up and followed their movement south to north. The pattern was obvious once I saw it. Overlapping arcs, converging toward the hills. Controlled. Deliberate. They were extending the burn line. The radio confirmed it minutes later, breaking a long stretch of silence with clipped, exhausted voices. Command authorizes forward denial into elevated terrain. Hills no longer considered defensible civilian zone. All remaining non-combatants advised to evacuate immediately. Evacuate where? I watched engineers lay charges along brush-heavy slopes, carefully spaced. Soldiers followed behind with drip torches, setting controlled fires that crawled uphill with terrifying patience. The chaparral went up fast, dry, resinous, eager to burn. Smoke rolled toward me, thick and bitter. They weren't trying to flush zombies out. They were sterilizing the terrain. By midday, helicopters joined in, not transports, gunships. They traced slow, deliberate paths, firing rockets into ravines where sound and movement had drawn infected. Explosions rippled to the canyons, echoing like thunder. The animals fled first. Deer burst from cover, panicked and glassy-eyed. Coyotes streaked across fire roads. I saw a mountain lion sprint downslope, tail low, fear overriding instinct. Zombies came later. They emerged from brush and gullies, drawn by sound, silhouettes staggering against smoke and flame. Some wandered directly into fire and kept going until they collapsed. Others stumbled toward the noise of machinery and gunfire below. The military didn't hesitate. Rifle fire cracked steadily, methodically, no wasted motion. This wasn't a battle. It was land clearing. I packed fast. Tent collapsed. Sleeping bag stuffed. Water containers sealed. I buried what I couldn't carry and erased obvious tracks the best I could. Old habits kicking in automatically. The wind shifted. Smoke poured over the ridge, stinging my eyes, turned the world orange and dim. Ash fell like snow, coating the white face of the sign in gray. The radio chirped one last time before the battery died. All remaining heat signatures within the zone are considered hostile. That was it. No exemptions. No nuance. I wasn't a survivor to them. I was a variable. I moved higher, away from the advancing line, cutting across trails I'd never used before, staying ahead of the fire's edge. Below me, controlled burns merged into uncontrolled ones, creating walls of flame that boxed the infected in, and anyone else unlucky enough to be there. At one point, I crested a ridge and saw the city again through smoke. Los Angeles was half hidden now, its glow muted, like embers under ash. The hills were no longer a refuge. They were the next sacrifice. As night fell, the gunfire faded, replaced by the crackle of burning brush and the distant, hollow thump of collapsing structures. The military line held steady below, impersonal and final. I found a rocky outcrop farther north, barely enough space to rest, and sat there until dawn, rifle across my knees, eyes stinging, lungs raw. The lesson was clear. You don't outrun collapse. You adapt until the place you're standing becomes the wrong one. And tomorrow, I'd have to decide where the next wrong place would be. I'd leave Los Angeles in a blaze of glory. No last stand. No dramatic rescue. I left because staying meant dying on someone else's schedule. By dawn, the hills behind me were burning in earnest. The control fires had merged into something uglier, wind-driven and indifferent. Smoke poured north, blotting out the sun and turning the morning into a copper-colored dusk. The Hollywood sign, my temporary fortress, was barely visible through the haze, its white letters stained gray, then swallowed completely. The military line below held firm. I could still hear engines, still see the occasional flare of muzzle fire. They weren't advancing anymore. They didn't need to. Anyone still inside the perimeter was either dead, infected, or written off. I took one last look south, then turned my back on the city. North meant uncertainty. Fewer people, less infrastructure, no promises. That was enough. I moved along ridgelines and fire roads, avoiding main trails, cutting across dry washes and animal paths. I'd learned years ago tracking wildlife. My pack was lighter now. Only what mattered: water, rifle, ammunition counted and recounted, a handful of protein bars. By midday, the city sounds were gone. No sirens, no gunfire, just wind, distant crackling fire, and the occasional hollow moan drifting up from canyons below. Zombies wanted these outskirts too, but fewer of them, isolated, confused, drawn more by echo than intent. They moved like leftovers of storm, scattered and slow. I skirted them easily. Once, I watched a group of 6 shuffle along a dry creek bed, clothes burned, skin blistered, movement stiff and delayed. They never looked up as I passed 30 yards above them, hidden by brush. Uncontrolled territory wasn't safe, but it was quiet. That mattered. I crossed out of Griffith Park by late afternoon, slipping into residential hills that had been evacuated in a hurry. Cars abandoned mid-driveway. Front doors hanging open. Dogs barking themselves hoarse behind fences. still waiting for people who weren't coming back. I freed 2 of them, left food where I could. By evening, I reached a ridgeline overlooking the San Fernando Valley. It looked untouched at first glance. Traffic lights still blinking. A few columns of smoke rising lazily. But through binoculars, the truth showed itself. Small fires, clusters of movement, neighborhoods already thinning out. The infection hadn't hit here hard yet, but it was coming. I camped that night in a drainage culvert under a service road, hidden from the wind. Fires glowing faintly to the south like a dying star. I slept in bursts, hand on my rifle, every sound magnified in the dark. Morning brought fog. Real fog, not smoke, rolling in from the coast, thick and cold. It swallowed the valley, muffling sound, hiding movement. Perfect cover. I moved north again. By day 10, the signs of organized response were gone entirely. No checkpoints, no broadcasts, just hand-painted warnings on highway signs and burned-out patrol cars left where they'd failed. I encountered survivors twice. The first group spotted me before I saw them. 3 men and a woman, armed, tired, wary. We exchanged information at a distance. No names, no plans. They were heading east, hoping desert slowed the dead. Maybe they were right. The second group never spoke. They rushed me from behind a burned-out gas station, desperation overriding sense. I fired once into the dirt at their feet. They froze. I backed away. No one followed. Animals reclaimed ground faster than people. Deer roamed suburban streets. Coyotes trotted through intersections. I saw another mountain lion at dawn, watching me from a covert, eyes calm and unafraid. Nature didn't panic. That helped. On the 11th night, I climbed a low ridge north of Santa Clarita and looked back. Los Angeles was a bruise on the horizon, smoke still rising, fires still glowing, no movement in the air. The city wasn't fighting anymore. It was being managed. I sat there until the stars came out, thinking about Ron, about whether Leo Carrillo was still quiet, about how many people had trusted evacuation signs, military lines, promises, about how survival had stopped being about strength or courage and turned into something simpler and colder, location. For now, north was better than south. Tomorrow, maybe east would be better than north. I don't know how long I'll keep moving, but I do know this. Los Angeles didn't fall in one moment. It was abandoned in pieces. And I was just one more piece, walking away into the dark, hoping the next place I stopped wouldn't already be burning. That's it for today's story. We will love to see you again soon. Thanks for listening, and most importantly, stay safe out there.